JC Shurburtt of Inside the Gamecocks of the Big Spur. He joins us right now to break everything down. JC, what's going on, my friend? Great to see you. How you doing?
Hey, great to be with you, Chris, today. Great segment, great show, and lots of good things happening out there. And so glad to talk to you today.
First things first, I love the beanie, JC. I love like the Yankee gray vibes, right? I feel like that black with white outline on gray is very, very underrated. And of course, Ray Tanner made it very popular. But I like when I see merch with that. I feel like that's a very underrated look. So I'm loving the
I think
beanie. I'm digging that.
I got to give my brother Cam. He helps me with Carolina Rise. He's my partner with it, and he put this together for I guess we had about 70 or 80 Gamecocks sign up for that before we even had a website. It was just on PayPal. And so we promised them like charter member swag. And my fiance was one of them. So she got a box with this stuff in it. But I agree. Those Yankee looking Ray Tanner uniforms during that era were sweet. I love it. Really sweet uniforms. I dig them. I think those uniforms scream excellence. So that's why I like
Well, they're still rocking them now. The only problem is we haven't been quite as excellent as we were. Hopefully that changes soon. But the Yankee gray is an all-time look. And I don't know if you knew this, JC, but one of the reasons the Gamecocks rock those uniforms and also rock pinstripes, Ray Tanner is a Yankees fan. So that's where he got his inspiration when they changed the uniforms. Because I think they went to those, they changed the uniforms a good bit when he was there. If you look back over like the early 2000s, but they released those, or they went to those pinstripes and those Yankee grays. I think it was like 2008, maybe 09, I want to say, when they first started the new stadium. So they haven't even been around that long, but it's one of those things with uniforms when you win back-to-back national championships. I got a buddy of mine. He's like, I don't know how I feel about the pinstripes. I'm like, well, they're not going anywhere because they're iconic at this point. They're iconic, right? Like, so it's, So, anyways,
I agree completely.
We could spend the entire show talking uniforms. At least,
another school in our state. I always thought their baseball uniforms kind of look like softball uniforms. So, I think the Gamecocks, who have bragging rights over Clemson in baseball for forever, until they beat Carolina in the College World Series. I think that's another thing that Carolina's got on them is the Gamecock uniforms are much more classy, I guess, more like baseball, and theirs kind of look like softball. I've always thought that, but anyway,
I would agree. I'd say you're spot on, JC. Let's get into the recruiting side of things, just South Carolina football as a whole, because what a busy week. Since you and I last spoke last week, of course, Gamecocks land Cam Pringle, Michael Smith. I mean, right? It's never too early to start talking the 2024 class, even 2025. I want to get into 2023 in a second as Shane Beamer continues to put the finishing touches on the class. And while we have you on today, we may even see another commitment. Elijah Caldwell is expected to announce his decision. And actually, Justin Stepp just 5 minutes ago tweeted I believe this is Daffy Duck gif of him doing like the fingers, like he's like waiting on something. So I would assume that means probably some positive news is around the corner. But first, let's focus on what we know right now. And again, that is Shane Beamer and company. The Gamecocks are off to a fast start in the 2024 class. I was just looking, JC, on 24/7 Sports. They're ranked 12th overall with commitments from 3 4-stars, Cam Pringle, Michael Smith, Dante Reno, 2 of those 3 coming this week. And Cam Pringle, the number 1 rated offensive tackle in the 2024 class. And you look, and what really stood out to me, JC, the 46th ranked player nationally. I feel like to be ranked that high as an offensive lineman, you got to be really good. 0.9736 on the composite. We'll start with Pringle first. Your thoughts on him? I know we spoke on this last week, of course, but now that the Gamecocks have landed him, just your overall thoughts and how big of a pickup that is literally and figuratively for South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you look at the 2024 cycle in the state of South Carolina, you probably have to go back to the 1990s. Brad Scott signed a really, really good offensive line class later in his tenure here. But a lot of those guys, gosh, for whatever reason, career-ending injuries, didn't make it into school, whatever. And that's the last time I think in this state you've had really more than one elite offensive line prospect. I mean, these guys, Pringle and Thompson, are a lot like Brandon Shell or Alex Barron back in the day that went to Florida State from Orangeburg Wilkinson, those types of guys. And that's to take nothing away from a Jordan McFadden at Clemson, who's awfully good at offensive tackle, or, your TJ Johnsons and AJ Cans through the years, or, anybody else from within the state, Kyle Nunn from within the state that started and had a good career at Carolina. These guys, though, these are the type of guys Georgia and Alabama sign. Your 6'7", 300+ pound guys that can move their feet. Pringle is not, sometimes, and I was talking to one of our evaluators at 24/7 Sports, and a good rule of thumb when you're evaluating offensive tackles is you want guys like 6'7", 270 instead of 60 pounds heavier. But the difference is, the reason you don't want that extra weight is because it's easier to put bulk on these big guys than to get it off of them. But Pringle's not a big fat guy. I mean, he's really quite lean for that big, and so is Josiah Thompson. So, really big pickup, number 1 tackle in the country. I think his overall ranking is going to continue to go up because most of the time when you're doing the rankings, your top offensive tackle, not necessarily a guard. It's hard to get a 5-star rating as a guard or a center, but as a tackle, if you're the best in the country, you're usually in that 5-star range. So I expect he and Josiah Thompson both, and I do think Thompson will be a Gamecock eventually, to be amongst the best in the country at that position. And that's unprecedented when you're talking about in-state recruiting and just kind of the types of players that they've had. D linemen like this before a lot because it's D-line heaven, right? Offensive tackles like this, only once in a blue moon. So, Carolina's done a really good job of getting this one in the boat, and then they got to close on Thompson. And I think, wow, you look at that, you look down the road, you could definitely have 2 really good bookends starting for the Gamecocks here in a few years.
JC, what do you attribute that success to? Because I know I've spoken on it a lot in regards to, like, I love the fact that Beamer is committing to recruiting guys in the trenches, right? I mean, he obviously understands it's a line of scrimmage league, but I mean, you think back, I mean, South Carolina had some pretty good offensive lines from 10 to 13 during that run, if you will. But I mean, the Gamecocks have never recruited like this when it comes to the offensive line talent. And again, they're doing it on both sides. I mean, do you attribute that to anything specifically? I mean, is the tandem of this thing with Shane Beamer? Like, is it just a great run of players they're kind of running into? Like, do you feel like it's a philosophy thing, or is it just kind of working out this way? Because South Carolina is obviously making some major waves when it comes to recruiting big time offensive linemen specifically.
Yeah, I think you had to give Lonnie Teasley, Greg Atkins, along with Sam Searby, who I believe is either a grad assistant or an analyst on the O-line, a lot of credit. They've done a great job of building relationships with these guys. And then it kind of all just feeds one on top of the other. Taylor Edwards, the director of player personnel, is also very good at this. And last year, to get a guy like Big Tree, Bob Alade, and Marquis Anderson, and Trovon Ball, who probably is better than even his low 4-star ranking says as an interior guy, and to get those guys in early and then close like they did, even with some help in the portal this year on the offensive line, I think that's a testament to their ability to build relationships. I think that at the end of the day, would it have been easier for Big Tree to stay at home, given some things that have happened in his personal life? Yeah, sure. But the relationship won out. The comfort level won out. And all recruiting decisions are based on that comfort level. And you don't get to that ultimate comfort level without a nice blend, including having great relationships. You can have relationships, but if you're not showing promise as a football program, i.e. winning, that's going to cause that comfort level to decrease because kids want to go where they want to win. If you don't have facilities, that can cause the comfort level to decrease, but Shane Beamer and his staff have not only done a great job doing the relationship building, but also, I think, putting on the field an emerging product. And it really started with A&M this year. That game had a ton of recruits at it, especially 2024 guys. And that's kind of where the groundwork is laid. Williams-Brice Stadium looks like a rock concert now. In that environment for that game and the Tennessee game, it was second to none. And those were the big weekends where guys came in and were just kind of blown away. I mean, you have players participating and storming the field afterward. from a recruiting standpoint, that's almost unheard of because most of the time your recruits, they're not really there as fans; they're just kind of checking it out. But the atmospheres at Williams-Brice, the fact that the team, was the talk of college football for 2 weeks, really on into the bowl game. I think the fact that you've got coaches there that want to build relationships and kind of embody what Shane Beamer wants to do with this program, with the culture and all of that. I think that speaks to success. And yeah, you're right. South Carolina's never recruited like this on the O line. I'll say this, and it's not to rain on a parade or anything, but O line is a lot of a good crapshoot sometimes. If you look at the draft, you'll have a guy that was a 5-star that may have gone somewhere that was, ranked, he's the first tackle taken. And the next guy is this guy from Northern Iowa that was like 6'9", 220 going into college and had one offer. And now he's 6'9", 310 and a monster, because so much depends on Mother Nature, Chris, at this position, how you're going to grow, how you're going to fill out. Mitch Hyatt at Clemson, for example, 5-star offensive tackle, really good college player, did not get drafted. Why? Because he never really got above 275 pounds, and you got to be bigger than that to play in the league. So it is a crapshoot. A coach that you and I both know well told me one time, he said, on offensive line, if you sign 5 and 3 of them pan out, that's a good day. That's a good year. So I'm not going to sit there and say they're going to be Alabama or Georgia or A&M lining up here in 2 or 3 years. But, hey, the more you get, if you do hit 3 of 5, that means you get 6 or 7 rather than 4, 4 or 5 and have weak links. So I think there's reason to be excited. Shane Beamer has been clear that he wants to run the football. He believes in running the ball, that you have to do that. He's absolutely right. And to run it effectively, you have to have the big uglies up front. And Carolina is in the process of upgrading across the board with the last class and now this cycle.
JC, sticking with the 2024 class, just a couple of days later after Cam Pringle, again, the momentum continued. Michael Smith from Savannah, Georgia, Calvary Day School, 6'4", 225-pound tight end, another 4-star, a .9412 on the 24/7 Sports Composite, the 6th ranked tight end in the country in the 2024 class. He chooses the Gamecocks, and JC, you can tell a lot by a kid's offer list. And I mean, this dude was offered by everybody. I mean, everybody wanted this kid. Just talk about his commitment, how big of a deal it is for South Carolina to, again, go into the state of Georgia and pull a guy like this. Again, the size jumps out to me, again, 6'4", 225, but the offer list especially. I mean, we're talking Alabama, Auburn, LSU. Like, everybody wanted this kid. Who did he not have an offer from? Your overall thoughts on the Michael Smith commitment?
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of, I think I've mentioned Clemson 3 or 4 times here so far. I hate to keep doing that, but Dwayne Allen, who played at Clemson, and he also was in the NFL for a while. I think he played for the Seahawks or somebody like that. Kid out of Eastern North Carolina. That's who Michael Smith reminds me of. He's not your the Washington kid from Georgia, 6'7", 280. Looks like Zion Williamson out there or something like that. And that's not who this guy is. He's more compact, almost built like a bigger receiver. I say he's probably, Dwayne Allen or Busta Anderson. But Busta, remember, was 205 coming out of McEachern High School in Powder Springs, Georgia. This guy's already 230. So I feel pretty good about this guy, putting on 15, 20 pounds and keeping his speed and athleticism and hands and, a special athlete. Dowell Loggins was kind of the cherry on top of the sundae, if you will. Eric Kimry, offered Smith first before he left. Carolina's been recruiting him a while. They were the first to offer. Then Jody Wright takes over, and Dowell Loggins was Smith's recruiter at Arkansas, right? And Arkansas was kind of in his top 2. It was kind of came down to Arkansas and the Gamecocks, and that tells you a little bit about Dowell Loggins' ability to recruit. If you're going to go all the way from Fayetteville, Arkansas to coastal Georgia, and with a kid with all those offers, and you're getting his top 2, you're probably a pretty good recruiter, I would guess. And so when Loggins came on board, it was just a formality matter of time. And certainly, this guy is in that tier of Georgia prospects, Chris. I think it's critical for South Carolina to win their share of battles in. Right now you're probably not going to go beat Georgia or Alabama on the players in that state. They won't. You're also going to have a couple that go to like Florida, Ohio State or wherever, Florida State, that just for whatever reason they want to go there. But then there's a whole swath of guys that Auburn recruits, Tennessee recruits, South Carolina and Florida recruit. Those are the types of battles you have to win in the state of Georgia. And if you look at last cycle, 2023, I think when they had 4 guys that were 4 stars or higher in Georgia that were in that tier, they won a lot of battles. Right now, Michael Smith's the first. You do have Wendell Gregory, another one of those Georgia 4 stars coming up. And so the Gamecocks again are using that state, which is important. You think about the history of the program: George Rogers, Connor Shaw, Sterling Sharp. All those guys are from Georgia, right? Going back to the late Dan Reeves, Georgia. I mean, he's from Americus. So South Carolina, historically, some of their better players have come from that state, and it's important. And I think there have been some staffs at times, like the Lou Holt staff at the end, did not recruit the state. Didn't really do much over there at all. And then, under Spurrier, you didn't have a whole big commitment to it. But then it got to the point too, Chris, where at times when Lorenzo Ward was here, they would take a lot of guys out of that state that were probably the wrong guys. I mean, for every Mike Davis, there were 3 guys that never played. And you got to be careful with that too. I think under Will Muschamp and now under Shane Beamer, it's almost been fine-tuned. Carolina, the last, 6-7 years, they've been focused on, smaller numbers from Georgia, but the right guys. And I think that says a lot, and it's probably an understated thing when you kind of look at Carolina's recruiting, because, these guys aren't in the top 5 in that state, but they're right there in that 20-25 range. And they're a hell of a lot of good players right there. I mean, there's too many for Georgia to take. So I think that's exactly the strategy that needs to happen. And it's paid off and will continue to pay off. I think that there's a lot of reason for optimism right now with regards to recruiting.
On that note, JC, as you were speaking, Elijah Caldwell has officially committed to the Gamecocks, the 3-star wide receiver out of Northwestern, Rock Hill, South Carolina, a .8683 on the composite. Chooses South Carolina over NC State. Your live reaction to his commitment, 6 foot 190 out of Northwestern, by the way, for the 2023 class.
I think this one may end up being bigger than people think. Just going back and, he was committed, I think, to East Carolina, and this is one of those things, man. East Carolina and App State both, if they got a kid from South Carolina, they got him in early. A lot of times that guy ends up being a really good player when all is said and done. I just watch him play, and it's that Northwestern high school offense. Like they've always run a lot of short passes. It's probably the closest thing in high school to Mike Leach's air raid that I've seen. Just not a lot of vertical, but a lot of horizontal short passes, catch it and run, use your athletes. And boy, when Elijah Caldwell gets the ball, he can get it and go. Had a huge state championship game against South Florence. I talked to somebody today. Maybe he was on my message board. I don't know, but or maybe on the show. But he said he's a South Florence fan. He said Elijah burnt them to the ground in the state championship game. And in this state, man, I'll tell you somebody else that was a late pickup at receiver, Deebo Samuel. I'll never forget the day that Steve Spurrier Jr. decided to take him. The word was, he's like, I'm going to take Tyshun Samuel. So Tyshun was, and that was something I don't think any of us didn't even register with the rest of us until maybe 2016, how good Deebo was. So in this state, receivers work out more times than not. It's a defensive line state. It's a wide receiver state, and you can usually find DBs just about every year. And so I think because he's, Northwestern in-state, enough speed, obviously, enough ball skills, obviously. Look out for Elijah Caldwell, because this could be one that, is kind of understated. Like I said, here he's committing January 26th. It's a little under the radar. It wouldn't surprise me to see him on the radar sooner rather than later.
There you go. Elijah Caldwell from Northwestern. Big time get for sure at the wide receiver position. Let's keep it rolling, JC, with recruiting. I know we touched on this morning, but Nicholas Harbor, all eyes will be on him next Wednesday on National Signing Day as he makes his decision. I know Shane Beamer and company were in-house last night. I'm sure giving their best possible sales pitch. Oregon gets him for their last visit this weekend. I know you're not overly optimistic, which, again, as I told you this morning, I think it's very normal to just kind of be cautious about it because who knows? I mean, nobody knows, right? I don't feel like there's really any lean at this point. Is that accurate to say? I mean, do you think – I would ask you this. If he doesn't go to South Carolina, where do you think he'll end up? Do you have a feeling, or do you think it's in Oregon? Do you think it's a Michigan? I know his mom likes Michigan a lot. You know, I know from talking to folks behind the scenes that, you know, South Carolina's 2023 recruits and commitments are very tight with him, and they're close, and they have a great relationship, and they feel like that can give them the edge. But unless you're in a Harbor's head or in the household with him or you're best friends with him, you probably don't know where he's going. And heck, he might not even know where he's going at this point.
Yeah, I don't know that he does. I think he's going to give Oregon a long look, Chris. And we talked about it on the show just now. I Googled and I forgot because I've been out there, right? I've been to the campus. And the thing about Oregon and University of Oregon is this. You look at it on TV or you see pictures, you're like, man, those are all nice facilities. And they are. But like Alton Stadium where they play football, you could fit that probably inside Williams-Brice and still have room to spare. Same with basketball, same with baseball. They're smaller venues, like quality over quantity. Their track facility is like, I mean, it looks like something from another country. Like look, when you turn it on and see these international track meets, double-decker stadium, stuff like that. So I think that's impressive. Steve Prefontaine ran track out there. Phil Knight, all that good stuff. So for a track athlete, it's going to be impressive. I think Michigan's kind of been that team that maybe even before the Gamecocks emerged was kind of the team to beat. And then, of course, South Carolina. I'd be surprised if it weren't one of those three. You never know with Maryland because when it gets down to closing time, you know, Maryland will just start throwing everything at them, you know, because they have nothing to lose. So you never know with Maryland. So I don't want to count the Terps out, but I think it'll be one of those three. It's one of those weird things. I'm probably not as optimistic as, you know, maybe even my contacts within the football program are about it. And it's probably, like I said earlier, it's probably because my two big stories, quote unquote, I've had since December have been Dowell Loggins and Trajan Jeffcoat. And I'm like, both of those caused well, let's just say they both caused a reaction. So maybe I'm just gun shy, but I'm just I don't know. I think the in-home visit last night went really well with Beamer. Beamer's really good with the in-home. So we'll see sort of how that plays out. And, you know, certainly I think there's, you know, good news for the Gamecock fans out there. There's reason to tune in on the traditional signing day again. You know, normally you're just last couple of years it's been nothing, but there's a big announcement coming, so we'll see sort of what happens.
Do we know time? Has he announced that yet, or is that? I would assume he's going to work with a network and do it like nationally televised.
Probably, and I don't know if I don't know if that's been set yet. I'm assuming he'll either do it with like CBS 24/7 Sports because they'll have an all-day thing going on, or maybe even like or ESPN. It'll be one of those two if it is televised, and if it's not, I'm sure there'll be some streaming or something. Somebody will be up in Washington D.C. making it happen.
Yeah, don't think that one's going to go under the radar. That's safe to say.
Probably not.
Yeah. JC, I appreciate you being gracious with your time. Last thing, man, I definitely want to mention this. I feel like this sort of went under the radar, but Gamecocks did, you know, it came out this week. Eddie Lewis, the transfer wide receiver from Memphis, he's officially enrolled, so it became officially official. And you look at what he did at Memphis, was a solid player for them. I wanted to ask you about his addition, right? Because I wanted to make sure we give credit to it because we've seen South Carolina. I mean, you look at Juice Wells specifically, they've been able to go in the transfer portal and pick up guys that, you know, I know Juice Wells was obviously an All-American and a record setter at the FCS level versus where Lewis was just kind of a nice piece for the Memphis Tigers. But did you have any thoughts on his game? I know, you know, the reason I asked too is because, you know, outside of Juice, I think wide receiver 2 is pretty wide open. I mean, you're going to have guys like Leggett and Brown and Joyner and Sampson and Omega Blake and maybe some young guys fighting for it, but I don't think you have that that clear-cut second, definitely don't have a clear-cut third option. So maybe a guy like Lewis could slide in. And then just on the note of the transfer portal, would you expect South Carolina to target anyone specifically, or any specific positions, maybe I should say, as we continue to move forward? Because certainly now that you're probably not getting Jeff Coat, right? I think that's at best case on life support. I doubt it's happening. There's definitely some holes in this roster I think you could certainly plug with players in the portal, especially, I guess, it'll probably open up, I don't know exactly, after spring ball, maybe something like that. And you'll see some more movement. But just overall thoughts on the Lewis pickup and then the portal as a whole, how you think the Gamecocks will attack that.
Yeah, they still need edge. I don't think they would turn down a really good running back if they had that ability to go get a guy like that. Receiver, if there is a guy out there, I can see it happening. By the way, I was wrong. I was confusing Jakari Caldwell with Elijah Caldwell. Elijah Caldwell was committed to West Virginia. So he was a Big 12 commit. I apologize for that because I said East Carolina at the beginning of the show. But again, West Virginia, they throw it all over the yard. They love guys like this. So that's even better, right? So I think that's what they'll target. I think they're done on the offensive line. I think unless there's a special player on the interior of the D line, they're done. I think if they had a linebacker that they could get, they'd probably go. Corner, kind of 50-50 because there were some corners they could have gotten in the game with in the portal and elected not to just because of some, silly demands that were coming in from, certain players' inner circles about wanting to start. They really like the young defensive backs they have. And I've learned not to just to always trust Torian Gray on that, right? And so, I think linebacker, running back, definitely defensive end / edge will be, some places Carolina will go at the very least window shopping. The issue's been too, I mean, you look at the transfer portal, Chris, and there are defensive ends in there, but Carolina's evaluated a lot of these guys. And, I talked to some people from some other schools too. The edge this year is kind of the offensive line situation from last year in the portal. Just aren't a lot of good players, and so it's tough to be in this position if you're South Carolina this year. Maybe that's why Gilbert Edmond and Jordan Birch were such wanted products this year because there just isn't anybody. And so I think that's what also made the Jeff Coat thing pretty disappointing. But if they can find them, they can get them. I think Desmond Umeozulu, Montague Rames, come on down if it's your time to shine. Jordan Strong's got to get back from injury. And even at that, I'm not so sure there won't be some kind of, not necessarily a changing of the scheme, but maybe a more of an emphasis on odd man fronts and things like that, exotic looks next year for Clayton White. Because if you just don't have guys that can get out there and compete at the edge, you have to figure something else out. And the Gamecocks may not have the luxury of trotting out a 4-down front and doing what they normally do. But Clayton uses a lot of odd front anyway. And so maybe you just kind of tweak it and emphasize more of that next season to get a pass rush off and, make sure you can stop people, get the ball back to what should be a pretty good offense next year.
Well, JC, we went the entire segment without talking basketball, so I guess we could call that a success. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe that's a little harsh. Anything you want to say on basketball? I mean, another tough one last night, but Gigi Jackson's fun to watch.
I'm having a hard time finding hope with it, and I think it has more to do with like the state of recruiting in that sport, because it's all NIL, free agency, whatever. And so I'm having a hard time finding hope because if you go through a season like this normally, it's like, okay, well, there's reinforcements are on the way, right? That's not the case. Well, no offense to the guys that are committed, the 2 in-state guys, they're pretty good. But you're not sitting there waiting on the Fab Five to come in or anything like that. And you kind of wonder, this year's portal class that Lamont went and got, I'd say probably below average is what you call it. And so is he going to be able to get a higher quality guy in here? What's the plan? And I know he told Mike Morgan, when Mike came over for the Ole Miss game, that he should have hit the portal a little harder. Well, I mean, great, but I mean, you knew you had 3 guys on the roster. So, and I'm not being critical. I'm just saying, yeah, well, maybe it's a lesson learned for a guy that just got to this SEC level. But we'll see what happens with him. Certainly, it's hard to watch. I'm glad the baseball team has a typical Ray Tanner type schedule where they shouldn't lose a whole lot the first month or 2 of the season. So it'll at least give Gamecock fans some hope on the field or court or whatever. But right now it's just it's a tough situation with that men's basketball team, and it may get worse before it gets better. So unfortunately, so hopefully that won't be the case. But right now it's kind of what it is.
Indeed. JC Shurburtt of Inside the Gamecocks, the Big Spur, joining us every single Thursday. JC, man, I appreciate you taking the time. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and looking forward to doing it again next week, my friend. Should be a fun one with National Signing Day on Wednesday.
Heck yeah, Chris. Thanks to all y'all out there that listen, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, man. Sounds good.